Oh, my God. Mrs. Hayes, there are so many typos. Where did you find such an unprofessional lawyer? Brittany's laughter echoed through the marble hallway. Sharp and mocking, like shards of glass cutting through the silence. She held the divorce papers between her perfectly manicured fingers, shaking them slightly as if they were a trivial joke. Really, Skyler? You couldn't even be bothered to get a decent lawyer? Or is this just another ploy to get Caleb's attention? Oh, look at me. I'm so desperate for a divorce. I can't even write a proper paper. How sad. I stood there, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, the coldness in my bones spreading to my chest. The ginger tea Maria had made me was long gone, replaced by a bitter, burning sensation in my throat. I didn't care about the typos. I didn't care about Brittany's taunts. All I wanted was to sign those papers, walk out of this mansion and never look back. But Caleb's gaze, cold and unforgiving, pinned me in place. Give her back the papers, he said, his voice low and gravelly, lacking any hint of the warmth I'd once known. Brittany pouted, but she obeyed, tossing the papers back to me with a flick of her wrist. They landed in my arms, crumpled at the edges, much like my dignity after 3 years of being his gold digger wife. You want a divorce? Caleb asked, taking a step closer, his cologne a woody scent I'd once loved now made my stomach churn. He leaned in, his breath fanning my face, and I could smell the faint trace of Brittany's perfume on him. Fine, but I meant what I said. Pay me back the $500,000 and I'll sign. No exceptions. I will, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Give me 6 months. That's all I need. Brittany snickered. 6 months, honey. You can't even afford a cup of coffee right now. Where are you going to get $500,000 in 6 months? Become a waitress, a stripper? Oh, wait. You already sold yourself once for money. Maybe you can do it again. I didn't respond. I didn't have the energy. Arguing with her would be like talking to a wall. She was too wrapped up in Caleb's wealth and attention to see the truth. Instead, I turned and walked back to my room, the crumpled divorce papers pressed to my chest. The door closed behind me and I leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. I hugged my knees to my chest and let the tears come. 6 months? How could I possibly get $500,000 in 6 months? I had no job, no connections, and a mother whose medical bills were still piling up. My savings were long gone, and Caleb hadn't given me a single dime since our wedding day. The only person who believed me was Maria, and she was just a housekeeper. She couldn't help me financially. I thought back to the day of our wedding, the chaos and the panic. My mom had been rushed to the hospital, the doctor telling me she needed emergency surgery for a cerebral hemorrhage. I'd been terrified. My mom was all I had. When I begged Caleb for the money, I'd never thought it would destroy everything. I'd never thought his love for me was so fragile, so easily shattered by a single mistake. And then there was Miss Hayes, Caleb's mother, the woman who'd orchestrated the whole thing, who'd tested me like a lab rat to see if I was worthy of her son. She threatened me, told me to keep quiet about the test, or she cut off my mom's medical care. I'd had no choice but to comply. But now, as I sat on the floor of my empty bedroom, I wondered if it was all worth it. If keeping my mom alive was worth losing the man I loved. Worth being branded a gold digger for the rest of my life. A sharp pain in my stomach pulled me out of my thoughts. The gastroenteritis flare-up was still lingering, and I hadn't taken any medicine. I reached into my pocket, feeling the $7 I had left. It wasn't enough for a doctor's visit, let alone medication. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the pain. I couldn't afford to be sick right now. I had to find a job. I had to get the money. The next morning, I woke up early, determined to start looking for work. I put on the only outfit I had that wasn't worn out. A simple black dress I'd bought for my first date with Caleb. And headed out. The mansion was quiet. Most of the staff still asleep. Maria was in the kitchen making breakfast. And she looked up when she saw me. "Mrs. Hayes, are you going out?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. She noticed the way I was holding my stomach and frowned. "You're still not feeling well. Maybe you should rest." "I can't rest," I said, forcing a smile. "I need to find a job. I have to pay Caleb back." Maria's face fell. "Mrs. Hayes, you know how hard it is for you to find work. Everyone in this city knows you're Mr. Hayes' wife. And no one wants to hire you. They think you're just looking for a way to get back at him. Or to mooch off his money." "I know," I said, my voice breaking, "but I have to try. I can't stay here anymore. I can't keep being treated like this." Maria walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I believe in you, Skyler. I always have. And if you need help, anything at all, just tell me. I have some savings. It's not much, but it's something." Tears filled my eyes. Maria was the only person who'd shown me kindness in these 3 years. I hugged her tightly, whispering, "Thank you, but I can't take your money. This is my mess and I have to fix it myself." I left the mansion and headed downtown, my stomach still aching. I went from one store to another applying for any job I could find. Waitress, cashier, retail associate. But every time I told them my name or they saw my wedding ring, their expressions changed. They'd make up excuses. "We're not hiring right now. We already found someone. You're overqualified." I knew the truth. They didn't want to hire Skyler Miller, the gold digger wife of Caleb Hayes. But at the end of the day, I'd applied to over 20 jobs and I hadn't gotten a single call back. I was exhausted, hungry and in pain. I sat on a bench in the park, watching the people walk by, and felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. How was I going to get $500,000? How was I going to get out of this mess? Just then, my phone rang. It was the hospital calling about my mom. My heart skipped a beat and I answered quickly, my hands shaking. "Miss Miller. This is Dr. Carter." The voice on the other end said, "Your mother's condition has taken a turn for the worse. She's developed a complication from her previous surgery. And she needs another operation. The cost is $50,000. I need the money within 48 hours or we can't proceed with the surgery." $0. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they did. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears. I'll get the money. I promise." I hung up the phone. And I felt like the world was crashing down around me. $50,000 in 48 hours. I didn't even have $100 on me. The only person who could help me was Caleb. But I couldn't ask him, not after everything he'd said. Not after the way he treated me. He'd just call me a gold digger again. Just sneer and ask me how much I wanted this time. But I had no choice. My mom's life was on the line. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone and dialed Caleb's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. His voice called. "And what do you want, Skyler?" he asked. "I'm busy, Caleb. Please," I said, my voice trembling. "My mom is in the hospital. She needs another surgery. It costs $50,000. I need your help. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard his laugh, a cold, bitter laugh that made my blood run cold. Really, Skyler? That's the best you can do? Your mom is sick again. How convenient. You just want more money, don't you? You're never going to stop. Are you? No, Caleb. It's true, I shouted, tears streaming down my face. She's really sick. Doctor said she needs the surgery within 48 hours. Please, I'm begging you. I'll pay you back. I swear. I'll add it to the $500,000. Just please help my mom. I don't believe you, he said, his voice firm. You lied about her being sick on our wedding day. Why should I believe you now? For all I know, this is just another scheme to get my money. Skyler, you're pathetic. He hung up the phone. The dial tone beeped in my ear and I collapsed onto the bench, sobbing uncontrollably. I had no one to turn to. No family, no friends. No job. I was completely alone. Just as I was about to give up, a car pulled up beside me. The window rolled down and I saw a familiar face, Layla. My best friend from college. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. Not since I'd married Caleb. She stopped talking to me after she heard about the wedding day incident, saying I'd sold my soul for money. Skyler, Lila asked, her voice filled with surprise. What are you doing here? You look terrible. I wiped away my tears, trying to compose myself. Lila, I need help. My mom is in the hospital and she needs surgery. I don't have the money. Caleb won't help me. I don't know what to do. Lila's expression softened. He got out of the car and sat down beside me. I'm sorry, Skyler. I heard what happened. I thought you really were a gold digger. But now seeing you like this, I don't think that's true. Tell me what really happened on your wedding day. For the first time in 3 years, I told someone the truth. I told her about Mrs. Hayes's test, about the threat to my mom's medical care, about how I had no choice but to ask Caleb for the money. I told her about the misunderstanding, about how Caleb wouldn't believe me, about how he cheated on me and treated me like garbage. Layla listened quietly, her eyes filling with tears. When I finished, she hugged me tightly. Oh, Skyler. I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have been there for you. It's okay, I said, sobbing. I don't blame you. Everyone thinks I'm a gold digger. Why would you be any different? Because I know you, Lila said, pulling back and looking at me. You're not the type of person to sell yourself for money. You love your mom more than anything. I'll help you. I have some savings and I can borrow some from my family. We'll get the 50,000. We'll get the 50,000, Lila said, her grip on my shoulders firm and grounding. I promise you, Skyler. We'll get it right now. I stared at her, the blur of the city traffic behind her fading into insignificance. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't fighting a current alone. Lila, you don't have to do this. That's so much money. What if I can't pay you back quickly? Shut up, she said fiercely, pulling me toward the passenger side of her sedan. Get in the car. We're going to my bank, and then we're going to the hospital. You can pay me back whenever. Right now, your mom is the only thing that matters. The drive to the bank was a blur of frantic phone calls. Lila liquidated a mutual fund she had been saving for a down payment on a house, and called her brother to wire an additional $15,000. Watching her argue with the bank teller to expedite the cashier's check, I felt a profound, aching guilt, but it was eclipsed by a fierce determination. I would repay her. If it took my last breath, I would repay every single cent. We rushed into the sterile, brightly lit lobby of Stay Jude's hospital with exactly 45 minutes to spare. My shoes squeaked against the linoleum as I slammed the cashier's check onto the billing counter. My mother, Helen Miller. Dr. Carter said she needs surgery immediately. Here is the payment. My voice was breathless, ragged, but it didn't shake. The administrator processed the paperwork with agonizing slowness, but finally, she nodded. She's being prepped for the OR now. You can wait in the surgical wing. Lila and I sat in those uncomfortable plastic chairs for 6 hours. The lingering pain in my abdomen flared up repeatedly, sharp and punishing, but I ignored it. I drank lukewarm water from a paper cup and watched the clock on the wall tick away the seconds. When Dr. Carter finally pushed through the swinging double doors, his surgical scrubs were rumpled, but his eyes were kind. She made it through, he said, pulling off his scrub cap. It was a complicated vascular repair, but her vitals are stable. She's in the ICU. The next few days are critical, but the worst is over. I collapsed against Lila, the tension snapping like a frayed wire. I cried, not the bitter, humiliated tears of Caleb's mansion, but tears of pure, unadulterated relief. When I finally pulled myself together, it was past midnight. Lila drove me back to the gates of Caleb's estate. The sprawling iron structure looked less like a home and more like a prison than it ever had. Do you want me to come in with you? Lila asked, keeping the engine running. No, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. I'm just getting my things. I won't be long. You're coming home with me, she stated, leaving no room for argument. My guest room is yours. I nodded, stepping out into the cool night air. The mansion was deadly silent. I bypassed the grand foyer, slipping through the side entrance and making my way up the servants' stairs to my room. I didn't turn on the main lights. I pulled a duffel bag from the closet and began tossing my meager belongings into it. I left the designer dresses Caleb had bought me in the first month of our marriage. I left the diamond necklaces I had never worn. I packed only the jeans, sweaters, and t-shirts I had bought with my own money before the wedding. As I zipped the bag closed, the bedroom door clicked open. The hallway light spilled across the carpet, casting a long shadow into the room. Caleb stood in the doorway, wearing a dark silk robe, a glass of amber scotch in his hand. He looked at the duffel bag, his jaw tightening. What is this? He asked, his voice a low rumble. I'm leaving, I said smoothly. I picked up the divorce papers from the bedside table. I had signed them on the bottom line, right beneath the typos Brittany had found so amusing. I walked over and pressed the papers against his chest. He reflexively brought his free hand up to catch them. I signed them, I told him, looking directly into his cold, gray eyes. The lawyers can finalize it. As for the $500,000 I owe you, I have a drafted IOU tucked inside. I'll have it wired to your account within 6 months. Caleb looked down at the papers, a strange, unreadable emotion flickering in his eyes before it was buried under a sneer. And where exactly are you going? Back to the streets? Anywhere but here. I hoisted the bag onto my shoulder. Just then, the sound of heels clicking against the hardwood floor echoed down the hall. Brittany appeared behind Caleb, wearing one of his oversized button-down shirts, her blonde hair perfectly tousled. Caleb, babe, what's taking so long, oh? She stopped, her lips curving into a malicious smirk. The trash is taking itself out? I didn't even look at her. She was nothing to me. Just a symptom of Caleb's cruelty. Excuse me, I said, stepping around them. Caleb grabbed my arm. His grip was like a vice, the smell of his scotch and the woody cologne suffocating me. You're really going to walk out like this? After begging me for $50,000 not 12 hours ago? Did you find another wealthy mark that quickly, Skyler? I looked down at his hand, then back up to his face. Let go of me, Caleb. Or what? Or I'll scream, and Maria and the rest of the staff will come running to see the great Caleb Hayes manhandling his wife because his ego can't handle her walking away. He dropped my arm as if burned. "You're pathetic," he spat. "Don't come crawling back when you realize you're nothing without my name." "I am nothing with your name," I corrected softly. "I'm going to take mine back." I walked down the grand staircase, out the heavy oak doors, and down the long driveway to where Lila was waiting. As I climbed into her car, I didn't look back. The chapter of my life titled Caleb Hayes was over. The next 2 weeks were a grueling test of endurance. My mother woke up and was slowly transferred out of the ICU to a regular ward. The relief of her recovery gave me the strength to endure my own physical pain. Lila dragged me to a clinic where I was properly diagnosed and treated for the severe gastroenteritis that had been ravaging my body. With a prescription for antibiotics, strict dietary adjustments, and a few days of actual rest in Lila's quiet apartment, the color began to return to my cheeks. But the clock was ticking. 6 months. 500,000 for Caleb, and 50,000 for Lila. I needed a job. Not a minimum wage retail position that would barely cover groceries. Before I met Caleb, I had been a top-tier financial analyst, graduating near the top of my class at Wharton. I had given up a lucrative offer at a major firm because Caleb's mother had insisted that the Hayes family didn't have working wives. I opened my laptop and began researching the corporate landscape. Every firm in the city had ties to Caleb's conglomerate, Hayes Enterprises. If I applied to any of his partners or subsidiaries, he would have my resume thrown in the shredder within minutes. I needed an enemy. My cursor hovered over a name on a financial news website, Thorne Global. Elias Thorne was a ruthless, brilliant venture capitalist whose rivalry with Caleb Hayes was legendary. They had spent the last 5 years undercutting each other's bids, poaching each other's executives, and engaging in quiet, vicious corporate warfare. Elias Thorne wouldn't care that Caleb Hayes hated me. In fact, he might consider it an asset. I spent 3 days crafting an impeccable portfolio, analyzing Thorne Global's recent acquisitions, and drafting a 50-page proposal on a massive vulnerability in one of Hayes Enterprises' supply chains, a vulnerability I knew intimately from proofreading Caleb's documents during the early days of our marriage when he still pretended to trust me. I printed the document, dressed in a sharp navy blue blazer and pencil skirt Lila had lent me, and marched into the towering glass and steel headquarters of Thorne Global. Getting past the reception was nearly impossible. I sat in the lobby for 6 hours. When Elias Thorne finally walked through the revolving doors, flanked by 3 assistants, I stood up and intercepted him. "Mr. Thorne," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter of his entourage. He paused, a tall man in his late 30s with sharp, patrician features and eyes as cold and calculating as a winter storm. He looked me up and down. "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But I have the blueprint to dismantle Hayes Enterprises' logistics network in Southeast Asia." I held out the thick-bound folder. "My name is Skyler Miller. I was married to Caleb Hayes for 3 years. I know his business better than his own board of directors." The assistants gasped softly. Elias Thorne's eyes narrowed. He looked at the folder, then at me, searching for a lie. He found none. He took the folder. "My office. Top floor. You have 5 minutes." Those 5 minutes turned into 2 hours. Elias grilled me relentlessly. He tested my financial modeling, questioned my ethical boundaries, and analyzed my proposal with terrifying precision. By the time I finished presenting my analysis on Caleb's vulnerable logistics routes, Elias leaned back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers. "You're angry," Elias observed quietly. "And angry people are usually careless. But this is surgical." "I don't care about revenge, Mr. Thorne," I lied smoothly. "I care about compensation. I am looking for a senior analyst position, with a direct commission percentage on the acquisitions I secure." "You want a piece of the pie you're helping me steal from your ex-husband." Elias smirked. What's the number? I need to clear $550,000 in 6 months. Elias raised an eyebrow. That was an astronomical bonus for a new hire, but the deal I was handing him was worth hundreds of millions. I'll give you a desk in the war room, Elias said, standing up and extending his hand. If this logistics buyout goes through based on your intelligence, you'll get a 1% finder's fee. That's $1 million. If you fail, or if this is a trap set by Caleb, I'll bury you so deep you won't even be able to get a job flipping burgers. Do we have an understanding? Perfectly, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, entirely professional. For the next 4 months, I didn't exist. I was a ghost haunting the halls of Thorn Global. I arrived at 5 in the morning and left at midnight. I barely saw Lila, though I wired her small amounts of money from my base salary every 2 weeks. I visited my mother on Sundays, sitting by her hospital bed as she steadily regained her strength, moving from the hospital to a private rehabilitation center paid for by Elias's generous corporate insurance plan, which he had granted me access to early. The work was grueling. Caleb was not an idiot, his defenses were strong. But Elias and I were relentless. I mapped out Caleb's shell companies, identified the weak links in his supplier contracts, and engineered a hostile takeover of the shipping conglomerate that handled 60% of Hayes Enterprises' freight. I didn't think about Caleb's face. I didn't think about Brittany's laughter. I thought only of numbers, contracts, and the heavy, intoxicating weight of independence. By the end of the 4th month, the trap snapped shut. Thorn Global acquired the shipping conglomerate in a stealth buyout. Caleb lost billions in projected revenue, and his supply chain was crippled. The financial press went wild. Elias Thorn was hailed as a genius. And a wire transfer of $1.2 million hit my newly opened private bank account. I sat in my office, a corner suite Elias had given me, and stared at the zeros on my computer screen. I traced the numbers with a trembling finger. I had done it. I had the money. I transferred $50,000 directly to Lila, adding a $10,000 thank you bonus that I knew she would try to reject. Then, I requested a certified cashier's check for $500,000. I put it in my purse, the paper feeling heavier than gold. While my star was rising, Caleb's world was beginning to fracture. I wouldn't know the exact details until much later, pieced together from rumors and Maria's tearful phone calls, but the cracks started showing the week the shipping deal went public. Caleb was furious. He demanded an internal audit, screaming at his executives to find the mole who had leaked his logistics vulnerabilities. During the chaos, his mother, Mrs. Hayes, decided to visit the mansion. She walked in demanding attention, complaining about how Thorn's victory was affecting her social standing. Brittany, who had moved into my old room and completely redecorated it, made a snide comment about Mrs. Hayes's outdated taste in jewelry. The two women, both vicious and self-serving, finally clashed without me there to act as a buffer. "Don't speak to me like that, you little tramp, Mrs. Hayes had snapped in the grand foyer, her voice carrying to where Caleb was reviewing legal documents in the adjacent study. I tolerated Skyler because she was at least quiet. I can easily have Caleb throw you out just like I got rid of her. Caleb had stepped out of the study. "What did you say, Mother?" Mrs. Hayes had frozen, her pale, powdered face going chalky. "Nothing, darling. Just disciplining this girl." "You said you got rid of Skyler," Caleb pressed, his voice dangerously quiet. "What did you mean?" "She was a gold digger, Caleb. You know that." Mrs. Hayes stammered. "She left with nothing," Caleb said, the reality of my departure finally piercing his stubborn ego. "She took a duffel bag of old clothes and left $500,000 of jewelry on the vanity. She hasn't touched a single credit card. Her phone is disconnected. A gold digger doesn't walk away into the night. She begged you for $50,000. Brittany chimed in, trying to align with Caleb. "She's probably hooking on the streets right now." Shut up, Brittany, Caleb snapped, never taking his eyes off his mother. Mother. What did you do on my wedding day? Mrs. Hayes had tried to lie, but Caleb was a shark when he smelled blood. He confiscated her phone. He called his head of security. Within an hour, he had the hospital logs from 3 years ago. He saw the timestamp. He saw that Helen Miller had indeed suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage on the morning of his wedding. Then, he interrogated Maria. The housekeeper, finally freed from her fear of Mrs. Hayes, poured out everything. She told Caleb how his mother had cornered me in the bridal suite, threatening to cancel my mother's insurance policy if I didn't ask Caleb for money to prove my loyalty to the Hayes name. She told him how I had cried myself to sleep every night, how I had starved myself when my stomach issues flared up because he had cut off my allowance, and how I had scrubbed the mansion floors to earn my keep while he paraded Brittany around. Caleb had collapsed into the chair in his study, the weight of his own arrogance crushing him. He had punished an innocent woman for 3 years. He had mocked her while her mother was dying. He had driven his wife into the arms of the unforgiving streets, replacing her with a woman who only loved his wallet. He threw Brittany out that very night. He didn't even let her pack. He had security drag her kicking and screaming down the driveway. He banished his mother from the estate, cutting off her stipend. And then, he began to look for me. But I was no longer Skyler Hayes, the meek, terrified girl. I was Skyler Miller, the ghost of Thorne Global. Month 5. Elias Thorne hosted an exclusive gala at the Pierre Hotel to celebrate our recent acquisitions. The ballroom was a sea of bespoke tuxedos, glittering diamonds, and champagne towers. I wore a backless, emerald green silk gown that flowed like water around my legs. My hair, previously a dull, stressed brown, was styled into sleek, glossy waves. The dark circles under my eyes were gone, replaced by the sharp, confident gaze of a woman who had fought her way out of hell. I stood by the bar, laughing at a dry joke Elias had just made about the SEC, when the room seemed to undergo a subtle shift in air pressure. Caleb walked in. He had not been invited, but a man with his wealth and reputation could bypass any velvet rope. He looked terrible. His tuxedo was impeccable, but his face was haggard. His cheekbones were sharp, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion and an unfamiliar, desperate hunger. He scanned the room, ignoring the murmurs of surprise from the other guests. When his eyes landed on me, he stopped dead in his tracks. I saw the shock register on his face. He looked at the emerald gown, the diamonds at my throat, a loan from Elias to complete the corporate armor, and the relaxed, genuine smile on my lips. I saw his chest heave as he took a step forward, then another, pushing past the elite crowd like a drowning man swimming toward a beacon. Elias noticed my shift in posture. He followed my gaze and a slow, predatory smile touched his lips. Ah. The ex-husband. Shall I have security escort him out? No, I said, my voice steady. I can handle him. I stepped away from the bar, meeting Caleb halfway across the marble floor. Skyler, he breathed, his voice cracking. He looked as if he wanted to reach out and touch me, but he kept his hands clenched at his sides. God, you look incredible. Hello, Caleb. I kept my voice perfectly polite, the tone one might use with a mildly annoying client. I've been looking everywhere for you, he said, the words tumbling out of him in a rush. I hired private investigators. You completely vanished. When I heard rumors that Elias Thorne had a new secret weapon. I never thought. He swallowed hard, his eyes scanning my face for any trace of the girl he had broken. Skyler, I know. I know everything. Everything? I asked, taking a sip of my champagne. About my mother, he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. About the hospital on our wedding day. I checked the logs. I talked to Maria. Skyler, I am so sorry. I was blind. I was an arrogant, stupid fool. I thought you were using me, and I let my pride turn me into a monster. Please let me fix this. I stared at him. 3 years ago, those words would have been a miracle. I would have fallen into his arms, sobbing with relief. But now? Now, they were just noise. There's nothing to fix, Caleb. Our divorce was finalized last week. I received the paperwork from the courts. I can undo it, he pleaded, taking a step closer. The smell of his cologne washed over me, but it no longer made my stomach churn. I felt absolutely nothing. I kicked Brittany out. I cut my mother off entirely. The mansion is empty. I want you back, Skyler. I love you. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. You don't love me, Caleb. You love the idea of owning me. And right now, you're just experiencing the shock of realizing your favorite toy grew legs and walked away. His face flushed with shame. That's not true. I swear to you, I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Whatever you need. Whatever you want. I reached into my silver clutch. My fingers brushed against the crisp edge of the cashier's check I had been carrying for weeks. I pulled it out and held it between my index and middle finger. You want to make it up to me? I asked, extending my hand. He looked at the piece of paper, confused. He reached out and took it. As his eyes scanned the numbers, $500,000.00, the blood drained completely from his face. What is this? He whispered. My debt, I said clearly. Paid in full. A month early, actually. How did you get this? I earned it, I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that made him flinch. I designed the logistics buyout that cost your company $2 billion last month. Elias paid me a handsome commission. Caleb stumbled back a half step, the check fluttering in his trembling hand. The realization that I was the architect of his recent corporate humiliation hit him with the force of a physical blow. You did that? I did, I nodded. You taught me a lot about business, Caleb. You taught me that loyalty is an illusion, mercy is a weakness, and the only thing that matters is the bottom line. Skyler, please, he begged, tears actually brimming in his cold gray eyes. Keep the money. I don't want it. I just want you. Let me take care of you. I don't need you to take care of me, I said, stepping back. And I don't want your money. We are completely, entirely even. Don't ever contact me again. I turned my back on him and walked away. I didn't look over my shoulder. I walked back to Elias, who handed me a fresh glass of champagne. Brutal, Elias murmured, clinking his glass against mine. I approve. Just closing an old account, I said, taking a sip. The champagne tasted like victory. A year passed. The leaves in Central Park turned from vibrant green to fiery orange, and a crisp chill filled the air. I sat on a park bench, a warm cup of artisan coffee in my hand. Beside me sat my mother. She looked healthier than she had in a decade. The surgery had been a complete success, and the subsequent rehabilitation had restored her mobility and her bright, loving spirit. You're quiet today, sweetheart, my mom said, wrapping her scarf a little tighter. Thinking about work? No, I smiled, leaning my head on her shoulder. Just thinking about how nice it is to just sit here. I was now the vice president of strategic acquisitions at Thorne Global. I had bought a beautiful penthouse overlooking the river. Lila had quit her grueling corporate job and used the money I had given her to open a boutique bakery in Brooklyn, which I frequented every Sunday. Caleb Hayes was a ghost of my past. The financial papers reported that Hayes Enterprises was struggling, suffering from a string of poor leadership decisions and a CEO who seemed increasingly erratic and reclusive. There were rumors that Caleb spent his days alone in his massive, empty mansion, drinking heavily, estranged from his mother and entirely isolated from the elite circles he once dominated. I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel angry. I just didn't feel anything for him at all. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Julian, a brilliant architectural developer I had met during a recent merger negotiation. He was kind, patient, and possessed a quiet strength that didn't demand the submission of everyone around him. Julian, got reservations at that Italian place you mentioned. 7 p.m.? I promise not to talk about zoning laws tonight. I smiled, typing back a quick sounds perfect. See you then? A boy, my mother teased, nudging my side. A man, I corrected softly. A good one, I think. You deserve a good one, Skyler, she said, squeezing my hand. You've fought so hard. I looked out at the sprawling lawn of the park, watching the children play and the dogs run. The pain in my stomach was a distant memory. The heavy, suffocating weight of the Hayes name had been completely washed away. I had been broken, branded, and tossed aside. I had been told I was nothing more than a parasite. But in the fire of their cruelty, I had forged my own armor. I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. I was Skyler Miller. I owed nothing to anyone, and my future was entirely, beautifully my own.